Welcome to the Impact Over Optics podcast, a place where real progress shines beyond appearances and distractions. Here, voices from across industries come together to share wisdom, stories, and strategies that remind us what's possible when purpose leads the way. Because true progress is not measured by how it looks, but by the impact it leaves behind. Let's get started.
Welcome to Impact Over Optics, the podcast where we go beyond appearances and focus on what really moves the needle: authentic leadership, purposeful results, and lasting impact. I am your host, Dave Dieffenbach, and today I'm joined by Fotine Sotiropoulos, a leader in marketing within the veterinary industry and a longtime friend and collaborator. Fotine brings over 20 years of experience across product management, product marketing, and senior marketing leadership within the veterinary industry, and is the founder of Thavma Consulting, whose mission empowers veterinary service and innovation-driven companies to clarify their message, build lasting trust, and drive sustainable growth through strategy-first marketing. In her work, she serves as a strategic partner to founders at key inflection points, providing senior-level marketing leadership without the need to build a full internal team. She's been brought in at inflection points in a company's journey, which suits our topic this week around decision-making. Outside of work, aside from being a small business owner, Fotine is a proud mother of one busy daughter. Welcome to the podcast, Fotine. Did I miss anything in the bio to start?
No, thank you. You were very, very generous. The one thing that I would add is, while we do focus on strategy first, and I know that you'll love this, Dave, the customer is at the center of everything we do. And being really clear about who we're serving and why and what their needs are makes that a really focused effort and ensures we're impactful as we go to market.
That's great. Customers are pretty important. Some of them become my friends, as we were talking about before we started rolling. One thing we like to start with here, because I know you, just to get to know you better, is there a project you've worked on in the past or recently that you're pretty proud of you'd like to share with us?
Yeah. I don't think that you'll be surprised by this. Starting Thavma and honestly becoming a mother and doing those things at the same time. I'm a single mother, and becoming a mom and launching your own business is hard and requires focus, and requires you being really clear about what you're trying to do and what's most important and where the trade-offs are. And it's not always easy, but it has been a fulfilling year. My business hit 1 year old.
Wow.
At the end of December. And I had up and down moments, which I'm sure most founders can appreciate, or anyone going on their own will appreciate, but feel really proud of, making it through the year and having to make difficult decisions and navigate that, but also being clear on why I started to begin with. Not only do I want to help customers bring, great products and services into the market and feel like they can do it with, limited budgets, but, a lot of passion, but also to be able to have a life and be present with my daughter when I need to be. She can do anything she sets her mind to.
That's awesome. And happy birthday, Thavma. I can't believe it's been a year already.
Oh.
That's amazing. It's been a fun journey to witness. We're going to probably come back to Theophania and to some of your decisions there as we get further along, but let's just start the basics. This month we're talking about decision-making. This whole episode's bulletproof decision-making. And you work with a lot of startups and founders. Is there a common theme you find when you work with them on how they approach decision-making, either well or poorly?
Yeah, that's a great question. And one of the consistent themes that I see is indecision masked as flexibility. Right. So the decision to focus on, let's say, market entry and to say, or we've done the work, we think this is our biggest opportunity, but then also leaving a door open for other activity in other markets. And while that's masked as flexibility and being open, what's really driving that, I think, one is fear, right? Fear of making the wrong decision. And the second sometimes could be thinking that you're being strategic, right? Deploying your resources in multiple ways to see if you can drive growth in multiple markets. And what ends up happening is it really dilutes your efforts and you're not successful in what you want to do.
Yeah. So that's, first of all, I feel a little bit heard, seen, and maybe fear that you just talked about me a bit, because in agile software, we oftentimes use the term, and I think I talked about this in our opening podcast, we go fast and we fail fast and learn. And so often that people just do that as a way to just start moving and say, don't bother me. But I have also counseled clients before who seem to be everywhere all at once, just indecisiveness. Do you have tactics in which you help them first recognize that limitation and then help them move past it?
I think it comes down to the framework I use to get to the strategy, right? Where you're focused on who you are, who you serve, and what's going to make the biggest impact. And then pulling the customer into that to inform the strategy and the planning, because then it becomes a really easy conversation. Not only do they bring me in as the expert, but at this point, I'm sort of removing myself to say, you brought me in, I talked to your customers, this is what they're saying, and this is how you move forward successfully. And those are really some of the approaches that I use to become really, really clear, because you can't argue with that.
Right, right. Yeah, decision making. In our opening episode too, Jim Viscusi, who's one of our co-founders, he's a decision making kind of nerd. He says it, so I can say it. It's a science, right? And most of us don't think of it that way. Do you have a sense of where instinct can fit in to decision making in your life, or do you really think of it really needing to be mostly objective?
I think that they work together. And you and I have talked about this before, that I use instinct a lot to guide me, and I also use experience to say, yes, my instincts is right, but you really have to do the work to say yes. You have to go to the customer, you have to do the strategy, you have to understand what the market needs, who you're serving, in order to reinforce that your instincts are right, because on their own, they can sometimes get you into trouble.
And you and I have, we've got a couple of decades working together. A parallel question to this is, when does experience, or what we think of as instinct, when is that an advantage and a disadvantage in what we do?
I think experience gives you, insights into what's worked. And I think it's really, really important, right? That's one of the things that makes me different in what I do is my experience in the industry. So I use that as a baseline, but where it becomes not useful or it doesn't work is when you just assume that your past experience dictates everything that's going to happen in the future. So it's all about trusting and verifying, right? Taking that experience to guide you, but verifying that it's still going to work the way that it has before you move forward. Because if you don't, then your experience becomes a blind spot, really.
That's great. Thank you for that. And one thing I've noticed, if you follow the journey of Thavma Consulting and in Fotine, she talks a lot about AI. And I'll admit that I'm a laggard or somewhat laggard. And yet I'm curious, if you use AI to help you make decisions currently, is it helping you?
It is. And I know you and I talk about this all the time, right? Mm-hmm. Being a founder or being a solopreneur, consultant on your own, it's very, very, it can be lonely. It can be isolating. And sometimes you need a sounding board. So really, and I've shared this with you, I use AI as my sounding board. So I have a hypothesis based on my instinct or based on my experience, and I use it as a way to go back and forth to really refine some of those thoughts and to make sure I'm thinking it through all the way. That's one way that I use AI. The other way that I use it is to amplify some of my efforts. So a lot of the administrative or the operations part of my business, I'm one person. There's only so much I can do in a given day. And I'm learning every day how I can do that to amplify some of those pieces or to automate some of those pieces. Anything from how I onboard client to how I engage my team to be able to support those clients on a day-to-day basis. So I'm not necessarily at the center of everything because I'm a bottleneck.
You're not a bottleneck.
I
appreciate
am.
that though.
I can be.
It's good for founders to represent when they're in their own way. And it's hard to do that for sure. It's interesting. This podcast, we're not intending just to talk about business. We want to talk about life as well. And so I'd like to go back, if we can, to some of those earlier conversations about projects you're proud of. And we didn't really have AI back when we worked at IDEX, back when you made a decision to leave and start your own company, and back when you decided to pursue motherhood. Pick one or any of those. I'd love to hear a little bit about a time when you felt stuck and just the process you went to identify other alternatives.
Yeah, I think all of the things that you brought up are connected for me at a time when I felt stuck. I loved my time at IDEX. I will be forever grateful for the things that I did and the things that I learned. I was part of the company early on before they hit tremendous growth, right? So I was part of all the changes, and all of that has given me such great experience. And when I got to before I made the decision to leave IDEX, if you just looked at it on paper, right? I had a career that inspired me and continued to grow. I got to do some really great things, but I got to a point where I had a pull that said something is missing. And the decision to leave IDEX wasn't really about giving something up. It was actually about making the decision about what I wanted the next part of my life, or my next project, or the next step in my journey to be. And that included being a mother. And it was one of the hardest decisions I ever had to make. But once I was clear about what I wanted and actually naming it what I wanted my life to be like, I've often shared that as wonderful as my life was at that point, I traveled, I talked to customers, I got to work on all kinds of different things. I started to feel like I was a passenger in my own life, and that, I wasn't creating moments that I would look back on to say, wow, I have these happy family moments, or I have these moments that really made an impact that shaped, my entire life journey. And that's when I became clear to say, I don't want to be just a passenger in my own life. I want to be creating it. I want to be living it in the way that I see fit. And it became easy from there.
Thank you for sharing that. Would you say that was a flash moment? You had a dream and this is what you wanted, or did this evolve over time?
It evolved over time. And it happened in steps. I wouldn't have been able to make the decision in a flash moment. It was just too big of a decision, because essentially what happened is I changed my entire life.
Right.
But baby steps, right? I knew I wanted my life to be different. So I made a step into, okay, here's step one into, how I wanted it to be different. I went into a different role. I started to do a different job. And then I started to move the two pieces, both my professional life and my personal life, together. And then you get to a point where you realize you can't do both at the level that I was doing it. And I needed to make some decisions. And in the end, what I wanted for my life and the life I wanted to create for my daughter was the priority.
That's awesome. I'm reading a book right now, and those in my close network, they suffer when I'm reading a book. I talk about it all the time. It's called Designing Your Life, and it's a great book that helps you understand that there's ways to design the path you want. And it sounds like something you were doing too is what they call prototyping, where you're doing small mini experiments. Well, first time I read it, I didn't do the exercises. Definitely do the exercises if you're going to, but it encourages you to create paths and follow them. And I think you did it without that kind of structure. You still did that. I think you understood that there was a desire and a need. And most listeners here probably have times that they were stuck. And then you stopped to evaluate options. And a journey of 1,000 miles takes the first step, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, keep walking down that line. So I know you left the comfort of a big company. What sort of thought process or maybe even official process did you do in deciding to start Thavma? That was a pretty big change. How did you do that?
So initially I had every intention of going back into a corporate environment. I decided to leave my job to focus on my family and my health and stay home with my daughter. And I did that. But when I was ready to go back to work, I thought, okay, maybe I'll consult for a little while, because I needed to have some income, and that will give me some room to make my next decision about where I want to land. Once I started consulting, it became very, very clear to me that that's really what I wanted to do. Mm-hmm. But I still had a lot of fear around it, right? Fear of, can I really do this on my own? Do I really want to leave the stability that a corporate career provides to doing it all on my own? Inconsistency in pay, for example. Those are pretty big decisions, especially when you have a child. And then what does that mean in terms of how I can manage my life as a single mom? So once I started consulting, and I was consulting in the vet space, originally I thought, well, maybe I'll go into healthcare. I can take all of the amazing things I've learned, and it's completely transferable, and go into women's health. And while I was consulting in the vet space, I felt re-inspired about staying where I grew up. And the reason was because of the passion, because it is, while there's a ton of opportunity, it's a small community. And even when you're entering, people want to help each other, right? You meet someone and instantly I can see people thinking, how can I help you? And they usually say that to me. Yeah. Either how can I help you, or, hey, do you know Dave Dieffenbach? Because if you don't, he's doing these really cool things. You should meet with him. I'll do a warm introduction. When I started working with small companies, one of the things people said to me is, well, how can you help them market? They're so small, they don't have budgets. And one of the things that people don't realize is Yes, there were times at IDEX when we had big budgets, but there were more times when we were asked to do more with less and be creative. And in my own experience, I actually got to work at some startups that were inside of IDEX where we had no budgets, we had no team members, and you were scrappy and you learned how to make things happen. And I knew how to do that. And, my response to that was, you don't have to have big budgets. You
Right.
need to be focused and you need to know what's going to move the needle, and you can make really big things happen, and you should celebrate those because every win moves you closer to what your goal is. And I wanted to be able to do that. I wanted to be able to help bring visions to life and help calm some of that fear, uncertainty about how we're really gonna market against the giants
Right.
and market in. It's not just the vet industry that's noisy, it's any industry, right? There are so many players. There's social media. There's so many ways people are inundated with information. How do you cut through that?
Right. And, we journeyed a lot together, and in our time together working, we did some software work. We talked a lot about, we did pre-mortems before a software release and then post-mortems. Do you use either of those tools, especially when you look back at 1-year anniversary of Thavma? Are you looking back at anything to say, did I meet the goals and objectives I looked at?
I do. I actually am somewhat disciplined about this on a monthly and a quarterly basis. So when I decided to launch my business, I built a business plan. And then I took that business plan, I broke it into what does it look like on a quarterly basis, monthly, weekly, and then daily to see if I could achieve it, and set some very specific goals for myself that I looked at throughout the year. And then at the end of the year, I used my trusty AI partner and I dumped it all in, and I shared, like I was talking to a therapist slash, business coach, to say, here were my goals. Here's what I achieved. Here's where I'm feeling like I didn't do what needed to be done. I really need perspective into what I take into 2026, both in terms of new goals and the energy that I want to bring and what I learned. And it really grounded me, because I think as a founder, as a solopreneur, I probably spend more time beating myself up than I should about, oh, I could have done more, I could have done this. And I'm finding when you look back at those things and you make yourself say, what did I actually achieve? Down to the smallest thing. You can step back and say, wow, I actually accomplished a lot. Now, what does next year, look like?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think a lot of people, when they look back with a lot of questioning on their decisions, and you do need to learn to let go of some of that. If you know you made a bad decision, you can course correct, but there are so many, and the book will teach you this too. If everything feels the same, just pick one path and go for it, and don't look back too often. And I appreciate that you've been moving forward ever since you decided to. I've got a few what we call rapid fire questions here for you, and they don't require deep thinking, but one habit leaders should start doing immediately. What would you counsel?
I take time to evaluate, right? You get lost in growing, managing your business, and you're not actually building your business, right? You're down on the day-to-day. And you need to make sure that you're truly, taking time to grow your business.
Great. One decision that didn't work for you, but made you better.
One decision that didn't work for me was hiring. I'm in the process of scaling my business, and I thought I had a really good plan in front of me and had made some hires that didn't work out. And it was both a combination of maybe not recognizing what I needed in my business and then making decisions on past experience, which is a luxury you have when you work in a corporate environment. You can hire for potential.
Mm-hmm.
You cannot do that in a startup. If you're not learning and moving at the same time, everything stalls. And I made some hiring decisions, and, they weren't bad hires, but the timing or what my business really needed wasn't right. And at the time I was beating myself up because it was kind of an expensive decision, but it was less expensive than if I made it later on. So it
Right.
just made me better and really clear about what I needed, but also my approach to bringing team members on.
And thank you for that. One question leaders should ask themselves before any major decision.
Does this support what I'm ultimately trying to achieve?
Nice. I want to reflect back on something that you may not have realized, but when you were talking about when you founded Thavma, you talked about how you thought about going into healthcare consulting. And I think back to how we started this, how you talked about how a lot of founders use flexibility to mask decision. And I think it's really beautiful that you still have that open, right? You still can go into healthcare consulting, but you're not hinging on that. I think you either subconsciously or very intentionally learned your own lesson and have been sharing it with other people. So I thank you for that wisdom.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So if listeners could walk away with one message from you today, what should it be?
Don't let fear dictate what you really want. Believe in yourself, trust yourself. And I'll use something that you said, which is try fast, fail fast, learn from it. And regroup and keep going, because the journey, at least my journey as a founder, and I'm assuming this will resonate with a lot of people, is it's not easy, but if you make the decision that you want something, you have to keep going.
That's right. Yeah. And the path isn't linear either, is it?
It is not.
Yeah. Beautiful. Well, Fotine, we're going to wrap up here. I appreciate you joining us today. And if you want to follow Fotine on LinkedIn, she posts a lot of great content and or follow on thavmaconsulting.com. Until then, I'm Dave Dieffenbach. And remember, authentic change always outlasts appearance. Until next time, lead with purpose and leave a real mark.
Thanks again for joining us on the Impact Over Optics podcast. We hope today's insights sparked fresh ideas and reminded you of the power of purpose-driven work. Please share this episode with others who believe in real change, and join us again as we continue to look beyond appearances and focus on the impact that truly lasts.